As Texas voters hit the polls in the high-stakes runoff for U.S. Senator, the race between sitting Senator John Cornyn and Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton is drawing national attention with big questions about turnout, party divisions, and what this means for November. Well, joining us now is Jessica Husman with Vote Beat, a nonprofit newsroom focused on elections and voting access. Well, Jessica, what stands out to you the most about this race and what's at stake tonight?
You know what? I think this race is fascinating. I think it is a interesting experiment as to whether or not Texas is as on board with the MAGA base as other places have been in the primary. Trump's been on a bit of a retribution campaign to those Republicans who have wronged them and has been almost entirely successful. So we will see if it continues here tonight with Cornyn and Paxton.
Jessica, tell us, how have Republicans been reacting to Trump's endorsement of Ken Paxton?
It's a real mixed bag. I think the Republicans who are very MAGA aligned are praising the decision. Many of them had already endorsed Ken Paxton, but those who are concerned that MAGA is going too far to the right and may alienate a general audience during a general election are more worried. So, former Governor Rick Perry is out campaigning for Cornyn on that basis. John Cornyn put a statement out to that effect just I think yesterday, that Democrats would have a fighting chance in Texas if Paxton were the candidate because he's so polarizing.
So how could the nominee, Cornyn versus Paxton, change how competitive the race is come November?
I think that it is all down to Republican enthusiasm. If you take a look at the polls, Republicans are significantly less enthusiastic about turning out to vote in November than Democrats are by about a 10-point margin. And that's been consistent over several days, which is itself notable. And so I think that part of the reason that they say, according to these polls, that they are unsatisfied is because they do not like the direction that President Trump is going. And so I think that there's a real argument to be made that those same voters would not be particularly enthusiastic about turning out for a candidate that was so aligned with the president. And so, I think that the running theme that I'm hearing from Republicans is that they're really concerned about that lack of enthusiasm.
Okay, what would Democrats actually need to flip Texas?
I think that they're going to really need to get behind James Tallarico in a way that we have not seen the Texas Democratic Party do in its modern history, right? They are not great at running cohesive statewide campaigns that do not alienate the vast majority of people who reliably turn out at the polls in Texas and that succeed in actually getting new voters to the polls, right? We saw in when Beto was running that young people just loved Beto and then they did not turn out. And the party mechanism to get them to the polls is not as well developed as it should be. So the Democratic Party is really going to need to focus this year and make sure that those processes are in place to ensure that all of these people who are either jumping ship from the Republicans and might cast their ballot for a Democrat in the general election, or who have not historically voted actively but are so upset about what's happening that they register and turn out for James Tallarico, we're really going to need to see a more organized structure in place to support both of those groups.
Yeah. Okay, Jessica, runoffs typically draw fewer voters who usually shows up in these elections.
These are the diehards, right? These are the Democratic voters who always turn out. These are the Republican voters who are enthusiastic and always turn out. And so what that generally means is that these are base voters. These are the most Republican Republicans and most Democratic Democrats. And so that's a very different audience than who turns out in a general election. And so the trouble for these candidates is going to be appealing to two different groups of people that, given redistricting and party machinations, are increasingly divergent.
Now, you've touched on this, but again, how much could turnout ultimately sway the outcome of this race?
I think it's going to be everything. Runoff elections are historically very low turnout. And so it does really matter down to the individual voter who turns out and where they turn out. And so I think losing a few voters in the general, you can kind of get over that. Losing a few voters in a runoff is much more difficult to overcome.
All right, Jessica, we will absolutely be watching. Thank you so much for your time. Jessica Husman, we appreciate you.